So today we are going to be speaking about Dr. Harold Shipman, also known as Dr. Death. So he was arrested on the 7th of September in 1998. He was arrested for the murder of an elderly patient known as Catherine Grundy. So originally there were suspicions around the will of Catherine Grundy. Her daughter was actually a solicitor and reported the will to the police. And the main suspicious part of the will was that in the will the house was left to Dr. Shipman. However, the patient actually had two houses, and so surely it would be, I leave both of my houses to Dr. Harold Shipman, because another house wasn't even mentioned in the will. So Dr. Shipman actually had his own GP surgery. The will was forensically examined, and then it was found to be forged. So the police went to investigate and went to Harold Shipman's GP surgery and asked him for his typewriter. So after forensic examination, they found that the typewriter was used to write the will. However, he denied everything. He says that Mrs. Grundy, his patient, had actually borrowed the typewriter 2 to 3 times. Shipman actually signed her death certificate and said that she died of natural causes. So he said that she died of old age. So the body had to be exhumed, so it had to be dug up from her grave, sadly, so that they could examine the body. And then new victims actually emerged. So while the police were investigating, they went to ask the public if they had any knowledge of Shipman or any suspicions of Shipman. And locals had actually been calling him Dr. Death for up to 2 years prior to this, because of lots of elderly patients of his dying. So this happened in Hyde in Manchester, and the police had to exhume another 11 bodies. I mean, can you even imagine burying your mum and then having to have her body dug up so that they can examine it? So 4 weeks after the original patient, Mrs. Grundy, 4 weeks after her body was exhumed, they found lethal levels of diamorphine, which is a really, really strong painkiller. And when the police were interviewing Shipman, he actually tried to suggest that she had done it herself and took her own life. So Shipman actually nearly lost his license due to drug addiction. This was before he moved to Hyde. However, he didn't actually get struck off. He instead got fined £600, and he said in his statement that he would never practice again as a GP, and he was sent to rehab. So in 1977, he then moved to Hyde and began his career again as a GP and started from the beginning, basically. He was apparently very arrogant in police interviews. He obviously planned to get away with it. They examined his computer and found that he'd actually been tampering with medical evidence and falsifying medical notes. One of his victims, he said that she had a prior heart condition when she didn't. He had actually modified those notes to fit his story of his murder of the patient. So he was then hit with hard evidence because of the computer examination and all of the other evidence that the police had gathered together. And he basically had a breakdown, like his mind couldn't cope with all of the questions and all of the obvious evidence they had against him, and stopped answering the questions and said that he couldn't cope. So he was sent back to his cell, and the police actually had to stop questioning him. So then they had to wait for a forensic psychiatrist to come and examine him to see if he was still fit for interview, and he was declared mentally fit. So they continued their interview, and he refused to cooperate with police. So when they actually did a later interview, Shipman turned his back on the investigators and closed his eyes. So they were trying to show him evidence, and he wasn't even looking at the pictures of his victims because he just couldn't cope with all of it, basically. But that didn't matter because the police actually had enough evidence to charge him for 15 counts of murder between 1985 and 1998. His wife, Primrose, she knew nothing about the murders, and this was found. She was investigated, the police questioned her, and they found that she had no idea what was going on. Shipman's trial actually lasted 57 days, and he was found guilty. There was also a public inquiry which opened the day after Shipman was charged with the murders. So this was open to uncover the true scale of his crimes, because the police knew that 15 murders wasn't all that he'd committed, basically. They knew that he was a murderer and there was a lot more to find out. He was then moved to Wakefield Prison and he was in total denial of his crime. Prison were actually worried that he was going to continue his crimes behind bars, and they said that they thought he was holding clinics in prison. So 2 prisoners fell ill in Wakefield Prison and were taken to intensive care, and when they were taken to intensive care it was found that they had actually overdosed on black market drugs. When questioned, the patients actually didn't want to testify against Shipman. However, it was seen that they had actually been speaking to Shipman, and so the drugs were believed to have been administered by Shipman. Shipman never revealed whether he did this or not, and he also never really said why he killed all of the people that he did. There was 215 killings revealed. There may have been more. So at this point, the police knew that he had 215 victims, and Harold Shipman actually committed suicide in 2004. He worked in a prison textile shop, and he used textiles to create a noose for himself, and he used this as a ligature on one of the prison pipes. He timed his suicide perfectly. He wanted his wife to be financially secure and financially looked after. So because he died before his retirement age, his wife got his full pension and a lump sum of £100,000. After this suicide was reported in the papers, it was a huge article basically saying about Dr. Death and what he'd done. And then a nurse saw the article and actually remembered that she had worked with him in a hospital. So he was only a junior doctor at the time that she worked with him, and he was called Fred, not Harold. So the nurse was 18 at the time, and she remembers one night shift where 3 patients died of unexplained reasons. So an investigation was launched after he died and after the nurse reported this to the police. And they actually found more victims after the investigation. So they found that at this hospital, Shipman had actually killed 15 patients. So the public inquiry found that the killing spree of Harold Shipman had lasted 27 years. At Todd Morden, which is where he worked when he was addicted to drugs and before he went to rehab and moved to Hyde, he killed 1 patient for definite and 7 others were deemed suspicious. However, these were never proved, and in Hyde he killed 171 women and 44 men. So in total, that's around 250 victims that he killed before he was caught. But that's it for me today, guys. So let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think he got away with it for too long? Do you think that you would have realised sooner? Let me know, and if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. And you can follow me on Twitter as well, and I will see you next time.